Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides upcoming changes video. My name is Kellen and today I'll be going over all of the upcoming changes that are hitting the Rift in patch 10.2. This will be the very second patch of season 10, so there'll be a ton of major balance changes. However, please do keep in mind that nothing so far is set in stone and changes can be made before 10.2 actually hits the live servers. Some of your favorite champions like Kiana, Nautilus, Aphelios, Jinx, Draven, and many others will be affected, so stay tuned for that. Also, today's question of the day is who is the strongest champion in the game at the moment? My answer has to be Aphelios. That champion is just so overtuned, I don't even know where to begin. Let us know your answers to the comments down below. Also, before we get started, are you always getting ganked? Constantly demolished? Well, don't worry because we've got you covered. ProGuides is the #1 proven way to quickly level up your League of Legends skills. Whether you're looking for a tier list, champion guide, coaching, or courses from your favorite pro players, ProGuides is where you'll find all of it. Even players like Nightblue, BunnyFuFu, BoxBox, and LocoDoco support ProGuides. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description down below and start improving right now. And with all that stuff being said, let's jump into the video. To kick things off on a happy note, let's first cover some skins that are joining us on the Rift next patch. These skins were revealed in a previous video, but before the release dates were actually confirmed for patch 10.2. First, we have the Dragon Slayer Olaf and Dragon Slayer Diana skins. Then we have a third member of the same skin line, which is Dragon Slayer Trundle. Next up, we have the Guardian of the Sand skin line, which now features Rengar, Ryze, and Janna. These skins are looking great, and I'm definitely going to have to purchase that Trundle skin, especially because he's being buffed this coming patch as well. What a coincidence that must be. Also, one thing before we get into balance changes is that all random Earth is coming back very soon. The exact date is still unknown, but we do have some info saying that it'll be here within the next coming weeks. Alright, now let's move on to the balance changes. These are some general buffs and some nerfs to things like items, runes, and objectives. First off, Stormrazor. It has been a common favorite amongst ADCs in the current meta. Ever since its little rework, this item has been one of the strongest one-item power spikes in the game, and is finally receiving a small adjustment. For patch 10.2, Stormrazor will have its AD lowered from 55 to 50. This is a pretty decent nerf, which will open up some room for itemization option in the bot lane for the upcoming meta. This also means that champions who previously relied on Stormrazor as their first item will now be able to be a little bit more versatile with things like Infinity Edge or even Essence Reaver. Overall though, of course, this is a pretty okay nerf to some AD carries. Following that, we have another nerf to AD carry items, which is the Cloak of Agility. If you've been following our channel for quite a while, you would notice that we've mentioned several times about a Korean ADC build, which involves rushing 4 crit cloaks. And the reason that they do this is that this is a very quick way to gain 100% crit chance, which ultimately gives a ton of reliable damage for a pretty low cost. Unfortunately, this build was considered super overpowered, and the balance team are nerfing it for patch 10.2. Cloak of Agility will have its crit chance lowered from 25% to 20%, which then results in this build being nerfed pretty significantly. This is also another heavy hit for AD carries. Last up on the list, we have a buff to Frozen Heart. This has been overshadowed for quite a while. Other items like Randuin's and Thornmail, which effectively are doing the same thing, have been better for a long time. However, for this patch, we're finally seeing a buff to the item, and it now grants 110 armor instead of 100. And this is a pretty big buff to the item, and I'm hoping that we will see it be built more on tanks. However, of course, this also is an indirect nerf to AD carries once again, because it negatively impacts their role in the items that they build. Also, champions like Kassadin or Ryze that scale off mana may or may not build this item again. You never know, we'll have to wait and find out, but 110 armor on one item, pretty good. Up next, we have a change coming for the Rift Herald. Ever since the start of the preseason, you might have noticed that your jungler is just totally ignoring the top side of the map, and that's because the other side of the map, aka the dragons, are much more important now, and it's led to some junglers just saying, hey, Rift Herald sucks. However, for patch 10.2, the balance team has decided to make some changes, and now hopefully it will motivate junglers to start treating Herald as an actual objective once again. The base health of the Rift Herald will be lowered, but this means that it should be a lot easier to clear during all stages of the game, and you'll be spending less time on the top half of the map, spending all that time trying to kill it. This is a pretty good change by Riot, but still likely not enough for junglers to put a heavy amount of resources into the top lane. They always say it's an island for a reason. Finally, for the general changes, we have another buff coming for Omnistone. A few days ago, we mentioned that there were some leaks about being able to ban specific runes from appearing in your Omnistone RNG, and it turns out these leaks appear to be true, and you can now remove one keystone from your rotation for the rest of the game. This is huge, and this is a massive buff to champions that might like Omnistone, like Camille, Jace, or Ezreal, because they might usually have one or two bad keystones that they don't really want to use. However, this change is going to require some heavy testing, so it likely will not be released in patch 10.2, but in a future patch after that. That's in the general changes. Let's move on to the champion balance changes. We will start with the jungle this time since there are no top lane balance changes being made this patch. First up, the only jungle change this patch that we see for champions will be for Trundle, who's obviously receiving a skin, so he needs to be buffed. Although he's been getting a ton of buffs within the past few patches, they clearly were not enough to bring him back into the meta, and he's still struggling to keep up against other meta junglers. In a lot of sites, you can't even see his play rate. For patch 10.2, Trundle will have his W's movement speed increased from 20 to 40% to 30 to 50%, and then his pillar slow was buffed from 15 to 55% to 20 to 60%. If you look at these buffs by themselves, they don't really seem that big, but once you combine them together, you think about how you get more movement speed and you decrease their movement speed by more. Overall, you'll be able to close the gap much faster, and this may be the change that Trundle mains were finally looking for. This will make your ganks much stronger, and I'm definitely gonna have to try him out. Also, you may be able to pick Trundle top lane and just run people down. Alright boys, let's run it down mid. Qiyana's been dominating the high-low meta for quite some time and was long overdue for a nerf. Her damage, mobility, flexibility, stealth, everything that every new champion gets these days has just been super OP. So finally, she's been nerfed. She will have her W's attack speed bonus from 20% flat nerfed down to 5 to 25% scaling depending on the rank. Although this is quite a big nerf in her solo lanes, it's actually even more impactful in the jungle. Her clear speed will be so much slower early game now, and she'll be taking a lot more damage due to these attack speed nerfs. Honestly, this champion right here, Ziggs, is terrible, and he's been that way for a couple of seasons. He's been overshadowed for the longest time by the likes of Xerath and Vel'Koz, other AP poke mages. However, he's finally getting some love. His Q bouncing bomb will have its damage increased from 75 to 255 to 80 to 280, and his W satchel charge will have its knockback changed from 400 to 500. Both of these changes are fantastic for Ziggs. However, they will not be enough to bring him back into the mid lane. With the pure amount of burst and mobility in the game right now, a champion like Ziggs will struggle to keep up, and it honestly feels like, as sad as it is to say, he will never come back without a mini rework because champions like him just don't belong anymore. Lastly, for the mid lane, we have some more buffs to Victor. Victor recently received a rework which overall did improve his stance in the meta, but not by that much. However, the good news is he's not in the worst spot at the moment, and he really isn't considered that good either, so he might not be banned that much if you do learn him. However, for this patch, Victor will receive a small bug fix which will now let him use his base mana on top of his hex core mana values. This means that he will have about 300 more mana once he hits level 18, and that could mean several more mana casts and actually being able to get off a couple of spells. And one last thing before we jump into the ADCs, Akali has been confirmed to receive more nerfs in patch 10.3. So for the Akali mains, enjoy her while you can before she gets gutted for what feels like the 300th time. Alright, now on to the AD carries. Aphelios is one of the most overtuned and overloaded champions in the game right now and was in desperate need of even more nerfs. Although the previous changes did lower his win rate by a small amount, he still remains in the 200 to 230% in terms of ban rate, which is unbelievable. For patch 10.2, he will have his Q Calibrum cooldown increased from 9 to 6 seconds, scaling up to 10 to 8 seconds. Next up, the damage that the Mark does will also be nerfed from 20 to 40% with a 30% AD scaling to 15 flat with a 20% scaling. Lastly, Severum's Q will deal 5% less scaling per hit, and Mini Crescendum will have its AD values lowered from 1 to 2.64 to 1 to 2.23. All of these nerfs are aimed at lowering his insane damage output and adding more counterplay to his kit. You'll definitely be able to feel this reduced damage if you play Aphelios next patch, but don't worry, he'll probably still be insane. Jinx is getting one little mini change this patch, which will now allow her passive to activate whenever you kill an epic monster. And at first it doesn't seem like much, but this is a huge buff because this will allow her to pop off even harder in those 5v5 teamfights around Dragon or Baron. I honestly love this change, and Jinx mains have been asking for this buff for a very long time. I remember seeing this on forums for years. Lastly, for ADCs, we have a buff coming for Draven. Yep, you heard that right. League of Draven might be coming back because his ultimate is receiving a huge buff. The base damage is staying the same, but the scaling is getting changed from 110% scaling flat to 100% to 150% scaling. The 20 to 40% extra AD ratio is an insanely large amount for the mid to late game. Getting hit by his ultimate post level 16 will deal a ton of AoE burst, so watch out for him next patch. Lastly, of course, we have the supports. Nautilus has been one of the most oppressive and dominant support picks in the meta for a very long time and is finally being toned down. His Q Dredge line will have its damage lowered from 80 to 280 to 70 to 250. Although losing 30 damage is pretty big, it's tough to say if Nautilus will be dropped from the S+ tier due to these changes. He's survived a few heavy damage nerfs before, and his win rate has really never seemed to move. In order to truly knock the wind out of champions like Nautilus from the support role, the big nerf needs to be to Aftershock, but that probably won't happen for a very long time. Next up for supports, we have a few buffs coming for Lulu. Lulu has received a lot of big buffs last season, and it's looking like the balance team really wants to force her back into the meta because she has been bad for a very long time. For this patch, Lulu's base armor and base AD will receive slight adjustments, which aren't that major. However, her E will have its cooldown lowered from 10 to 8 seconds. 2 seconds doesn't seem like a lot, but for support champions who rush 40% CDR pretty quickly, 2 seconds is actually game-changing. Up next, we also have some buffs for Karma. Karma's been a recent target of nerfs from Riot due to her dominance in the top lane for pro play. You'll probably remember in pretty recent memory that she was super OP for a time. However, it appears that those days were very long gone at this point, and her nerfs were a bit much and has really impacted her stance in the meta as a support. For patch 10.2, Karma will have her damage increased on Q by 10 at all ranks, and her W damage increased at all ranks by 10 as well. Both these changes are great and will help her become a slightly stronger lane bully next patch. And finally, we have some buffs for Sona. She's actually receiving a series of changes next patch, which are all aimed at making her a little bit more viable. Her E will have the movement speed buffed from 10 to 40 with a 3% per 100 AP to 10 to 16% with 4% per 100 AP. In addition to that, it'll also buff her own movement speed from 10 to 14 with 3% per 100 AP to 25% with 4 per 100 AP. Once again, these are great buffs to Sona, but she will likely remain in the gutter for solo queue at least for this time. However, you know what? We might see more Sona and Taric in the bot lane for pro play. Gross. One last thing before we go, Wukong will be receiving a mini rework within the next few patches, and we'll be creating an in-depth video all about his changes made to his kit by the end of this week, so click the sub button to be notified of when that's going to be released. Anyway, that's going to be it for all of the upcoming changes in patch 10.2. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please hit that like, comment, and subscribe button to be notified of our next video. We will be making sure to keep you guys up to date as fast as we can whenever League of Legends has news that drops. This includes anything about new champions, reworks, balance changes, or updates about new games. Also, make sure to check out ProGuides.com if you want to see huge improvements to your rank. Our coaches there can seriously help you improve your game before we actually get really into Season 10, and that way you can start climbing after all 10 of your placements. That's going to be it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the Rift.